You are listening to the What a Word podcast, an interview-style podcast where guests bring their unique experiences and insight on culture, life's challenges, and faith. Each episode is seasoned with words which will inspire and encourage. Now, here is your host, Ryan Sharp.
Welcome to the What a Word podcast. It's a wonderful Saturday evening where I am. And as always, I'm honored to be a conduit each week. Our weekly podcast has guests to address life challenges, culture, and faith. What I've also been doing is amplifying some unconventional professions. Today is no different. My guest today is Rhianna Scyster. She's a St. Petersburg native, a lover of books, a student data and evaluation manager at CAP, a not-for-profit, and she's also pursuing her master's degree in public policy, which she plans to complete in April. I'm honored to be joined by her. Her work is pretty impactful, and she joins me today on the What a Word podcast. Please join me in welcoming Rhianna Scyster to the What a Word podcast. Welcome. So we spoke a little bit off record, and I told you how honored I was to have you, first of all. But I realized what I've been doing in the last number of years I've done this podcast is indirectly, I've been exposing listeners and viewers to some unconventional career choices. And I say unconventional because in our communities, we're not always exposed to all there is in terms of work that is impactful. And your work is pretty impactful, and I'm hoping we'll be able to capture a large percentage of what you do in your role. I wanted to bring you, though, to what kind of spearheaded this, your journey, whether it happened early or near towards the end. You highlighted that a mentor told you to stop playing it safe and be confident in your capabilities. Could you unpack for us what you believe the mentor meant when the mentor said, stop playing it safe?
Yes, so one of my closest mentors, we were sitting down having coffee, and I'm always like, I want to do this and this and this. And although I'm doing a lot, doing those things tends to take a toll, because imposter syndrome is real, and I'm learning not to continue to put that on myself, but it's a very real thing, to kind of feel like I know I'm in this room, I know I'm sitting at the table, but and my thought is always, what if they just like me? What if they just think I'm cool? Like, that many people actually think I'm cool, but what if they just think I'm great and my work really isn't that good, or I really don't work that hard? What if people are just giving me chances because they think I need it? And my mentor broke it down to me that it's good when people like you. You want to be liked, but people are not just giving you chances because they like you. They care about whatever work they bring you in. They care about that thing enough to say, Rhianna's great, but she's not. They care more about the organization than they do about liking me. So if I'm continuing to press into these spaces and be seated at these tables, it's because I work hard. And confidence is just like an ever-growing thing for me. I'm just kind of working my way through that and taking bigger chances. So
That's good. That's good. And I'm sure someone looking on or listening can take some comfort in what you just said, because you've amplified also that in doing that, you're challenging your fears and perhaps identifying the payoff with the risk involved. So I'm so proud of all you've accomplished, and we're going to get into it. What are you grateful for in this season?
yeah, it's funny that you asked me that. I was just like sweeping and cleaning up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at me. Like, I have a home to clean. I have a husband that loves me. I have a car. I don't like second guess if I can get to and from. I'm not questioning, am I going to eat? I go to work, like just a general just moment of like, look at where I'm sitting. And I know that we talked a little bit before we started, but just had like a super traumatic and abusive childhood and upbringing. And I just think it's powerful, like the way, I'm a Christian, the way the Lord works and kind of sweet and just kind of, I don't know, just gives you a moment to sit down and really be like, wow, like I could have ended up in so many other places. I could have ended up in so many other circumstances. And so just sweeping my floor and being with my dogs, I'm like, wow. So just grateful for everything overall.
It's powerful, powerful. And it's not lost on me that you were recently recognized as top 20 under 40. So you're still a pretty young person, and things, as you indicated, could have ended up a lot differently. And you highlighted some of that. Talk to us about um, how things changed for you. What led to the change or the change in direction for you as you see it?
So I was adopted when I was 10, but I want to say before that, I got into education because my teachers were always the consistent good for me. My teachers, like I knew home might be a mess, but when I go to school, the teachers are going to be there. They're going to be nice to me. It's going to be clean. I can rely on school. And so I always wanted to be a teacher. Being a teacher for 2 years, I recognize that the change I really want to see in education is policy led. And it's not the day to day. Now, the day to day is important. I love seeing my kids. I love talking with them, spending time with them. But the disproportionality in what we see across K through 12 education is so systemic and it is so deeply rooted. And so that's what led me to get my master's in public policy.
And that's sobering. Your experience, what your expectations were when you went to school every day. School sounded like it was a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
Your study, however, and we'll get into it, we could probably touch on it now. Your study focuses on discipline being an avenue or a conduit from the school to the prison pipeline. Unpack that for listeners and viewers.
Yeah. So my favorite quote is actually one of my favorite quotes is by Bettina Love. And she quotes that there is no school to prison pipeline because school is the prison. And that took me down a whole avenue of like, okay, like how are schools prisons? And so what I'm studying for my master's is how teacher biases, police presence on campus, teacher race, lack of training, how all of those things impact how Black students are perceived and then disciplined. And so a current book I'm reading by Kristen Hemming, it states that Black children are disproportionately disciplined and criminalized because they're not seen as children. And we have a tendency to adultify children, especially girls. We don't give them their girlhood and their boyhood. And I'm talking specifically Black children. We see Black girls being written up for referrals that are so subjective. So I'm seeing referrals like she was disrespectful or she had a bad attitude. And that is so easily perceived differently because let's say a white male teacher is talking to a young Black girl and she's doing this like I'm doing now. It's just a natural kind of cultural thing that we do. Oh, she was aggressive, she was defiant. And I can talk to that same student and we just chilling. We're having the time of our life, having a good time. And so all of those factors just play a huge role. We even see kindergarten. We see 5-year-olds being arrested on campus. And it's just insane to me how all those things play a factor. And then, like we said earlier, they come from me and then they get to you. And it's like, oh, you know, it feels a little too late, although it's not. I always want to extend grace and opportunity, but it feels too late. So I would like to implement some policies before we get out of school.
Wow, wow, wow. Because, you know, as you were talking, I thought about it, you know, that even if a student has a bad day or a disagreement or has some disagreement with the person in authority, there doesn't seem to be a lot of grace being offered to children depending on the color of that child.
Yep.
And that's very sobering.
Mm-hmm.
Because your experience sounded a lot different. It sounded like you had teachers who worked with you, who had empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you're pointing out now that the studies confirm that, especially in your
Right.
state, this is no longer present. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. For sure.
Wow, wow. So you are a lover of books, and we'll get back to your career in a second. We'll get back to it. A lover of books. Was there a book that you wish you had gotten earlier in life that stays on your bookshelf, gets reread over and over again, gets referred to over and over again?
Yeah. So it's interesting because there's not really a book I wish I would have got earlier because it came when it was supposed to come. But Angela Davis, Women, Race, and Class. I wish I had gotten that book earlier because it really just is so empowering. Like, Black womanhood is just so unique, and the history behind it is just, I mean, it's just crazy. Behind being a Black woman and being where I am today, the history behind that. That book really helped me to just feel empowered and navigate spaces that I really normally wouldn't have. So, like, policy, government in general is a very, very male dominated, white male dominated space. And so that book was just like, you have the power, you have the skill, and now you have what it takes to back that up. So Angela Davis, Women, Race, and Class is a great book.
How important is it for children of color to see themselves in the pages and see their journeys in even the stories in the pages?
That's, nothing touches that. Nothing touches a little Black girl, a little Black boy being like, oh, they look like me, you know. And I'm not gonna say little, anybody, right? It impacts us. Representation impacts us even well into our adulthood. It's so important. And so I kind of have another point about that, but we'll move forward.
Yeah, man, we'll get back to it. We'll get back to it for sure. Because as you mentioned, policy, it seems to me, and I think you would agree, that policy is what drives education forward and even backward. Talk to us about what you see in your work where policy is concerned.
Yeah, so equity and policy, it can be really far apart or it can be super, super close. So one of my first professors in the program told me that if you care about social change, if you care about justice, you care about policy. And I think we kind of see the opposite of that in some ways with like the current movement of education, especially here in Florida. We're seeing a lot of politicization. We're seeing a lot of polarization of education. We have this whole movement about what can be read in the classroom and what can be administered by teachers in the classroom. We are in a phase of student stories being completely just wiped out in the sake of we don't want to, you know, shake the table too much. We see like the safe space stickers are not allowed in schools anymore. And so if we are not showing our students true history and factual information, even if you take the political aspect out of it, then you're stripping away the entire identity and opportunity to learn. Because even growing up in my home, right, I grew up in a very conservative Black household, and I would not have learned to embrace differences of other people just from home, right? Like, you have to go to school. You have to talk to different people. You have to experience different cultures and different things for you to understand the importance of empathy and justice. It's like a lot of kids only get that from school. And so we're just slowly kind of, taking that away between the Stay Woke Act and the Don't Say Gay, and what teachers can and can't say. And it's hard. It's a rough battle, but policy should be close to equity. That is how you get there.
A light bulb went off, Rhianna, when you made that point, because I'm thinking even my own life, and when I think about how did I get here, history is what informs that, especially when you're forced to go back and look at decisions and things you had no control over. And I would like to think for someone looking at the world with all the different cultures, and they want to determine how did certain groups get where they got and how did others end up where they ended up. What impacted those groups beyond decision making and morality? Were there outside factors? Like you said, it brings to bear a more honest conversation and perhaps some empathy, because you're seeing now that some people who are in dire straits or who are challenged on every side, it wasn't because of a decision they made. And to your point, critical race theory and true history would help to address meaningful change. And I think coupled with policy would help us to have some truth and restoration and reconciliation, rather.
So we got like textbooks saying like we're not using slaves anymore. We're not even using enslaved people. We're using like workers. I'm like, what is happening? Like, I want to say I'm shocked, but I'm not. It's Florida. So, yeah.
So I mentioned to you that a mentor of yours challenged me. In fact, when we spoke, I said to her at the end, I believe I'm meeting my clients too late in life. I'm a public defender. And I said, I would love to be in a place where I could address the school to prison pipeline head on. And she said, that would be a powerful thing if you did it. But you started off with one career. You were in one career and you saw that policy would help you to address those issues head on. Talk to us about your current role as a student data and evaluation manager, coupled with your master's, and how the two came together to address the school to prison pipeline, etc.
So my love and interest in data and research came from school, came from my public policy background. And I went out into a role where, so the organization I work for, we provide arts education in K through 12 schools in Duval County. My role in that is to implement, collect, analyze, interpret the data that we bring in and see how our programming is improving student outcomes. And so the key measures that we focus on are attendance, behavior. You're looking at like academic records, student confidence. How are we impacting our students through arts education? Duval County is majority Black students, and that displays itself in our data for our organization of who we're serving. And so I'm not an arts person. I never done any arts stuff, but I care about numbers and I care about the story that numbers tell. And so just managing program evaluation tools and seeing how what we're implementing impacts students. And that's something that you have to do a policy. The last step of any policy in its implementation is evaluation. Is it working? Do we continue it? Do we stop it? Or what needs to be fixed or what needs to be addressed? So that evaluation piece is critical.
What do you feel when you see that something works? I mean, with all the data showing the stark realities
Mhm.
of the lives
Mhm.
of your target group, Black and brown children, what does it do for you as an analyst when you see this is in fact working?
It feels good. Okay. It feels good. And I'm like, okay, we can keep going. We can keep driving. But I'm also a very type A Enneagram 1 personality. And so I'm critical and I'm logical. And I'm like, always like, this is working, but how can we make it better? How can we make a bigger impact? How can we get more students? And I'm also very cautious of the fact that the world and our kids are moving fast. Like they are changing quick. And so what works now or what worked 10 years ago, that might need to be redone and polished and brushed up because I mean we're just moving fast. So even if something is successful and it feels good and it works and we keep doing it, I'm also very conscious of the fact that we can do better. We can always do better. And change happens. It's inevitable and you got to keep up with it. We got to be able to keep up with it.
So I wanted to also follow up with what are the factors that point to successes or failures in terms of the evaluation? And your bio seems to speak about how important it is to empower differences in students in terms of education. Could you amplify that for listeners and viewers? Why is it important to empower differences?
So I kind of touched on it earlier. Like the best education we get is often not learned from a book, and it's often not learned from our parents, or it's just not at home most of the time. Those experiences and interaction that we have in the classroom are so critical for creating a space in a world where differences are not just tolerated, but are genuinely embraced and empowered. I think that the first touch of diversity and empathy is what we deal with in school. And I'm thinking of my nephew who's 3 and is so tall now. Um, he can learn to share at home with mom and dad, but learning to share at school with your friends, you learn differences as soon as you hit the ground running in school, just social interaction. And I think the biggest part of embracing differences is just really understanding the humanness that comes with it. Like we intellectualize it and we read up on it and we study it, but sometimes it's really just as simple as as another interaction. And I also think about the impact on educators and how the shift that education is taking takes a toll on them. We have Black educators, LGBTQ educators, educators with disabilities. And so if we continue to push out this level of diversity and embracing differences, then we're also really, really, really impacting our teachers, our educators as well, because it's hard enough. I taught for 3 years and it's hard. I surely don't want to show up somewhere where I can't be my full self and I can't, tell my stories to my students. So it's so impactful all around, just and not just our students, but our teachers, our administrators, and our communities as well to embrace differences for sure.
You are nothing short of a miracle because, as you highlighted in the beginning, you were adopted, and your adoption, part of your experience that it seems, based on everything that's happened to this point, changed your life for the better. Could you say something to us about the role your adoptive parents played in your life?
Yeah, I love to brag on my parents. So they were not like foreign to me. My mom, I'll tell a quick story. My mom was an alcoholic and she was 9 months pregnant, drinking at a party, having a good time. And she had only known my godparents for a couple of hours. And she was tipsy And she asked them to be my godparents, and they took that very seriously. I was over their house most weekends, and then when she got to be really, really sick, when I was 10, they kind of transitioned me into their home. And so that was such a drastic transition. And I'm just now recognizing how drastic of a transition that was for me, because I went from just, I mean, living in a car, living in a shelter, abuse, to being here full time. And my godparents are like amazing. I mean that so genuinely. They are well rounded. They are focused. They kept me focused. They're loving. And that transition from one place to another played such a critical role. And I'll tell you this, the day after my mom passed away, I went to school. And I think that's really where school became my real like safety blanket, like that consistent good that I could count on. I went to school. And the next semester was the start of honor roll. I have not had honor roll or dean's list since the fourth grade. And I mean, it's just impactful, like the the difference that just an environment makes. Just that quick switch of, oh, I feel safe, so I'm good. I can focus on my homework. I can do what I need to do. Um, so yeah, I hope my godparents listen to this because I love them very much.
Oh, that's powerful, man. What a powerful story of what human effort, empathy, and being
Yeah.
other-centered could do for the lives of others. And you're carrying on that legacy and that tradition, no doubt, in your work. I wanted to speak to you about CAP. It's not a conventional entity. Could you talk to listeners about and viewers about the Cathedral Arts Project?
Yeah, so where I currently work, Cathedral Arts Project was founded in 1993. And what we do is we use a part-time teacher and fellowship model. And we implement arts education of all disciplines. So we have orchestra, we have art therapy for students with autism, we have dance and just everything you can think of when you think of arts. We implement those into the Duval County schools. We are currently at, I want to say for the 22-23 school year, I want to say we're at about 30 different sites. We're at a lot of sites, and we have a tons of courses that we offer for students K through 12. So I mean, it's really a unique kind of nonprofit because we are in the schools, but we're not a school, So we just, we do community outreach, performances. We have a yearly showcase, visual art showcase. So we really try to impact students through art and give them opportunity to be themselves fully.
What do you see as one of the objectives of CAP? Because I think what you've highlighted is this is addressing different learning styles, maybe different learning opportunities. You're talking the arts where maybe a student wouldn't come alive in the conventional setting, but through CAP, you're seeing that student come alive now because they're being exposed to all of these different things. So having said that, what is CAP revealing about maybe conventional education that has issues or maybe has the shortcomings of conventional education?
Yeah. So the difference between CAP students and non-CAP students is very clear. CAP students perform higher on state level assessments. They are more likely to improve attendance. They are less likely to have behavior issues. And what we see really across the board that both parents and students indicate on surveys and assessments is an increase in confidence. Um, Even students will say, I feel so much more confident after I performed. And I think, and this, I'm talking to myself when I say this, the impact of feeling confident is just, I mean, it goes beyond like, do you show up? It goes beyond how are you performing on an assessment. For students and parents to both say that their students feel more empowered, is, I mean, we're meeting the metric. We're certainly meeting that metric.
That's good, man. That's good. That's good. That's good. I want to ask you too about books again. Coming back to books. There is pushback, as you identified when we spoke earlier, pushback about teaching true history in the schools. On both sides, though, there are allies who want to know more. Some of them are, as you've indicated, opposed and afraid of what teaching history and policy would mean for students, etc. Are there some go-to books that those who are interested in the discussion on critical race theory should read? I would say, what are your go-to books for those who want to have better discussions on the issue and be more objective?
Brian, you done opened up a can of worms. Okay. So Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain by Zaretta Hammond is number one. One of my close friends, Dr. Carissa McCrae, actually just published her first book, and it is titled, give me a second, I'll tell you right now, if I can find it. Anyway, it's called Equitable Instruction, Empowered Students, and she just published that. Then you have Teaching Black Girls in the Face of Resistance, which is by Dr. Venus Evans, I think. What else? Ooh, there's so many. The last one was called I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. That one is really, really good. I recommend Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. Super good read. But the first couple that I mentioned are for teachers in the classroom. And I think the last couple were like out of the classroom. So
I appreciate that. And what I'll do, Rhianna, is I'll put the books in the notes of the podcast as resources mentioned, etc.
Great.
So I'll be sure to include those. I really, really appreciate it. Could we touch on briefly the differences between achievements and opportunity, achievement and opportunity gaps, which is also a focus of your study?
Yeah. So this is something that I recently learned, Ryan, the difference between achievement and opportunity gap. So we used to call it the achievement gap because it was solely based on student performance. And we were noticing that students in higher income areas, white students, were performing significantly higher than students in low socioeconomic settings and Black students. And we recently, and I say we, the education world, recently made the transition to the opportunity gap because we are trying to incorporate and recognize the systems in place that lead to those differences and not just isolate academic, achievement. So we are looking at the impact of discipline, the impact of resources, the impact of parents' level of education. And so that goes so deep. It goes as deep as a student not performing on an assessment well because they were staying up all night, and they stayed up all night because they had to watch a sibling. They had to watch a sibling because mom is working late. Mom is working late because she doesn't have adequate, a higher level of education to flex her hours. And it just goes so much deeper than how did they perform on a test. And so I think that is so impactful because we look at the whole story. We look at the entire system at play and not just high achieving, low achieving, but what is impacting that. And so I really like that we made that transition from achievement to opportunity gap.
What is impacting? Has that made its way to the professional development of educators in all schools now, or is it still something that's being is that being resisted by educators, the achievement versus opportunity discussion?
I don't think so. I think that most of our educators are extremely enlightened. And I think that we have always seen the impact, but we didn't quite know how to say it. And now we just have the verbiage for it. I always give credit to educators, and I think that although they don't often have a seat at the table, especially when policy is in play, we know. Like we see how our babies show up to school, and we know that it's more than, oh, they didn't perform well on the test. It's a given for us. Now we just have the verbiage to say it, but I definitely don't see any pushback. No.
And somehow that needs to make its way into the criminal justice entities who punish those who fall, into the cracks. Because like you've indicated, what leads to higher achievement has a lot to do with forces beyond the control of many of our students,
Mm-hmm.
So, that is very sobering, man.
Yeah.
So Rhianna, I'll say this, man. Your mentor told you to stop playing it safe. There is someone listening or viewing who has a desire to be as impactful as you are, as your adoptive parents were as well. They want to do something to offset some of the sobering statistics you mentioned about Black and brown children in the schools being over-disciplined. And they're
Right.
perhaps thinking, well, could I become a teacher? Is education the role for me? Or perhaps there's more I can do in terms of implementing policy. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a twofold question. One is just generally speaking, for that individual who is playing it safe, what could you say to that person about moving beyond that space where playing it safe feels the most comfortable to them? And then I'll ask you later on to talk about ways people of color and our allies can become more involved in policy and effectuating change.
Mm-hmm. So I think, although that's a twofold question, it kind of go together. I always encourage everyone, even if you don't have a child in education, even if you're not a teacher or an administrator, that you go to your school board meetings. You attend your city council meetings. And not only do you attend those things, but you make your voice heard at those situations. You also get involved in your local schools. Some people call them SAC, some people call them different things. Um, in your committees, because schools they are reaching out and pulling for community involvement. I encourage everyone to build a relationship with your local and even state level legislators. Write those letters, send those emails, make those phone calls. But before that, explore yourself and where you stand. Make sure where you stand and where your heart is at is in the right place, because a lot of times we can play the savior role, and we don't need saviors. We need allies. We need people that care about the work. I know in Jacksonville there are a lot of workshops that are put on by a place here called JPEF, which is a Think and Do Tank. Get involved in any organization that's local to you that is impacting education. We recently passed a mileage referendum to give increased teacher pay, increase the funding to arts and sports. And that was like such overwhelming community involvement. And I know a lot of people don't know where to start. So if there's someone in your community that is in education, reach out to them. That's how I found my mentor. I was searching, I sent her an email. I'm like, hey, I want to know you and your work. And I've done that several times. One of my mentors is actually the chairman of the school board, Daryl Willie. And I have no problem just saying, hey, I want to know you and your work. And people care about that. We need as many people, as many good people in education as possible. I don't want to encourage,
That's good. That's good. And I'll say finally this, that person who is dealing with the weight of imposter syndrome, code switching, etc. You've clearly indicated the importance of having mentors, but there's somebody who's just met you for the first time via this podcast and this YouTube, and they're looking for some encouragement because they're dealing with those issues as well. I'll ask you to say something finally to that person.
Yeah, to the person who's dealing with feeling like they don't really belong or they're here by accident. For a moment, I would hide my insecurity behind humility. I would always say, well, I'm just staying humble. I'm just staying humble. And it really was insecurity. It really was, oh, I don't feel like I belong here. And so that took just a lot of deep diving personally. It also looks practical, like me stop saying I have imposter syndrome and stop when I get off an interview or a podcast. I'm like, oh, did I mess up? It kind of looks like cut it, like stop it where it is. It also looks like affirmations on my mirror and in my car and on my phone, and understanding that you're nowhere by accident. And I think if any story tells that, it's definitely mine, because we talked earlier, I could be anywhere doing anything. And so let your story kind of empower you as well, and look at your current circumstances and run with it. And really, I mean, I've seen a lot of people get stuff that they didn't really earn it, but they were confident. And they're, somebody who's confident, like being confident is just half the battle. So if I just act confident enough, at some point, we're going to start really believing it about ourselves. For sure.
Awesome. Powerful. Thank you so much, Rhianna Scyster, St. Petersburg native, a student data and evaluation manager, working on master's degree in public policy, transparent, shared a lot. Thank you so much. Please, Rhianna, please let us know if you're available for speaking engagements, or whether you're comfortable with just having people connect with your journey. Please share all your handles with us.
Yeah, for sure. I'm totally open. I love to talk, if you can't tell. LinkedIn is first and last name Rhianna Scyster. Facebook is Rhianna Scyster. Instagram is at R_SSCYSTER. And that's pretty much where I am. And I'm always open. I'm super available. Super available. So
thank you so much, Rhianna, for joining us on the What a Word podcast. Blessings to you on your journey, and continue to blaze a trail. We're so proud of you, and thank you for all that you do. And thank you again for joining us on the What a Word podcast.
Thanks.
Most welcome.